Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and a very, very special welcome to, a local lad. When I say local, it's probably about an hour away from where I am. Mr. Darcy O'Rourke. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, keen to share some thoughts with your listeners here today.
No, it'd be cool. Now, for the listeners' benefit, Darcy, you are a financial advisor. You're also a mortgage broker, and you are the business owner of Barwon Wealth Management, specialising in sales. And this is an interesting one because I've not spoken to anybody from the financial services industry in terms of financial brokerage or advice. So we will put some caveats on what we're about to talk about today, and I know you'll read something out at some stage.
Yeah, I'll just chuck it out there now to get it over and done with. So I've got to let everyone know. Obviously, what we're talking about is just general information only, so not personal advice. I strongly recommend that you consult with a financial advisor before making any financial or investment decisions. And I do need to let everyone know I'm an authorized representative of Lifespan Financial Planning. Their AFSL is 229892. It's all done. We're done.
We've done that. We've done the compliance bit. So we're ready to rock. Mate, You and I have been connected on LinkedIn for a little while now, probably a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And as I said, you're always open to talking to really interesting people. And you do have an interesting story, which I'd love to jump into because, as we know, this is all about sales and sales leadership. And one of the key things around being successful in sales is, for a lot of them, you're going to be making a lot of money, but it's how you manage those finances so you can build some long-term wealth, which is the key to, I guess, longevity and success for most people. So before we jump into some of the key topics, love for you to give us a little bit of a background in terms of your journey and what led you to create what you've now created in terms of Barwon Wealth Management.
Yeah, so I started working in financial planning when I was I'd say I was about 20 actually. I remember I had my 21st birthday and I had some people that I worked with come along. So very early to the game. And I was still working the financial planning space while I was in uni actually. So got a lot of experience, worked in some, really great companies, and kind of towards the end of my initial stint in financial planning, it was right around when the Royal Commission into financial services was happening. Mm-hmm. The government was talking about all these changes to the industry. And I was kind of sitting back looking at it going, I'm 27, 28, maybe something like that around that point. I've been doing this my whole career, from uni, I've been in financial planning. Is this what I want to stick to doing? Didn't even know if the industry would be around in 10 years, the way they were talking about changes to financial services. And one of the kinds of clients that I really liked, that I really got along with, was clients that worked in sales. Like I just found they were, fun people. They were traveling around the country. They were going overseas. They were making good money, which you talked about at the start as well. So, if you're making a career change, you don't want to sort of go backwards. You generally want to increase how much you're earning, right? So I was really thinking, exactly right. That's one of the things you're after. Yeah. So I'm sort of sitting back going, do I keep doing this or do I do something else? And I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. I'll move into sales. And financial planning does have a decent sort of sales element to what you're doing. Like it's all about building relationships and bringing clients on and managing them. So like the account management side of it, but it is quite technical. Like you need to do a lot of paperwork and things like that. So I thought I'll give sales a go, jump into, a proper sales role. So I did the whole sort of SDR thing to start out, to get my foot in the door in the tech sales space, and then, work my way up to account executive and did like a BDM role and another account executive role. So I worked in that tech sales space for about 3 years. And one of the things I noticed is a lot of people were making really good money. They were very money motivated, and they had really clear goals around wanting to increase their income, and they were very driven people. But a lot of the time they then wouldn't actually make the most of that income. So they're working so hard, grinding every day to get this great income, and then they're making poor decisions to use that income. So I noticed that disconnect there. And it was in the back of my mind, do I go back into financial planning? Do I stick out working in sales? And I I sort of thought, you know what, like it's time to jump back, but specifically look after this group because there's no one in Australia that's doing it, as far as I could
Mm.
tell. I
Mm.
could find a couple of people in the US, some interesting advisors over there that specialize in working with sales professionals, but yeah, no one in Australia. So it's a bit of a unmet market, and I think there's a big need. Like it's not like it's just that there isn't anyone doing it. There's a big need there. So I kind of felt like I had to do it, had to jump in and close the gap.
And so I love to delve into a couple of things. One is, what was it about sales that piqued your interest? That and was it what you thought it was going to be, or was it something completely different?
Yeah. I think the main thing that piqued my interest was not having to do all of the paperwork stuff. Like I was already doing, I was already
Other
doing
people
so.
do that for you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. The paperwork side of things, there's plenty of people that can do that. Like the reality is, as an advisor, generally you're looking at things quite high level. When it comes to the nitty gritty of stuff, you can get someone else to do a lot of that stuff. A lot of the time, it'll be grads that are doing that, right?
Yeah,
Calculating, figures and stuff. It's not rocket science kind of thing. Once you sort of know the basics, you can calculate it and then check it over. So the one of the big appeals was just dealing with people more regularly instead of the paperwork side of things. Um, so yeah, that was probably a big thing. Then the next thing, so wasn't what I expected. I'd say it was probably a bit more monotonous in some ways than I expected, especially in like the SDR role. Like I started out cold calling dentists, so you're calling dentists saying the exact same thing every single time. So yeah, the monotony sort of wasn't great, but one of the things I like about sales is it's very you can build structured goals and you have a good idea of what you're going after. So you
mm,
can go, all right, for the next year, I'm going to have to do this annoying part of the job that I don't really want to do.
yeah,
But in a year from now, as long as I do that and I'm successful at it, I can then move on to the next step.
yeah,
So that's the kind of thing that I had in the back of my mind that helped me get through
yeah,
all the monotony.
yeah. And obviously, as you mentioned, you went from SDR right up to BDE and then account executive. So you obviously made some progress. That was in software sales, right? That you're in.
In software, yeah. So the first company it was called Podium. So I don't know if
Yeah,
you know them. They do like text messaging software kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. And so, how many years then was your sales career all up?
Yeah, I think it was about three. So
Okay.
I did probably close to 2 years at Podium. I think it was like 5 month stint at a startup that didn't go too great. Probably wasn't the best fit on both sides of things. It was a very technical product,
Yeah.
good product, but it probably a bit too technical for me. And then I went to a company called Creditor Watch for about a year. So they do commercial credit reporting. So having sort of the finance background did help a bit there, and
Mm.
yeah, that's a solid product as well. So there's only I think 3 or 4 credit bureaus, commercial
Yeah.
credit bureaus in Australia. So
Yeah.
they're doing things a bit differently. So yeah, if anyone wants to check them out, they're an interesting company as well.
Yeah. Because as you were talking there, the interesting thing is, in sales, we talk a lot about credibility, and in order to, and certainly from a financial services perspective, and financial advice, having gone through and experienced, well, not me personally, but have observed the Royal Commission, there's a lot of question marks. There has been a lot of question marks over a lot of different organisations and people within that organisation. So we talk a lot about having to establish credibility in the marketplace so that people will allocate you a level of trust and respect to want to listen to you, but then potentially do business with you. As you look back now, obviously there was a pull back to financial services, and you've seen the opportunity that there was a niche that nobody's really focusing on sales. As you look back now, how much of the credibility you've now established based on being in sales has helped you now build Barwon Wealth Management?
Yeah, I think it's a massive part of it because the people I'm talking to every day understand that I've been through what they're going through, and I understand their challenges and their concerns, and understand how much work they're putting into their job on a day to day basis. So it's a huge part of it, and I wouldn't be looking after sales professionals if I didn't have that experience. So it's kind of easy. It's one of those things in life. People will kind of look back on things and go, oh, like I was in financial planning and then I left to go into sales. Maybe I should have just stuck it out. Where would my financial planning business be if I had have just stuck it out? But in reality, I'd probably be dealing with clients that are a bit more boring that I probably don't have as much fun working with, and probably not helping as much, right? Like there'd
Like
still be
dentists,
that
right? You'd be
unmet
dealing
need.
with dentists.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Like that's one of those classic niches people want to go after. Pretty much everyone in financial planning, if they go after a niche, they want the medicos, so the doctors and the
Yeah,
dentists
because they're
and
the
everything.
well, in many cases, not always, high net
Yeah,
worth individuals, right? Yeah.
yeah. So everyone's sort of chasing them, and the poor salespeople are left alone. There's not much love for salespeople in Australia.
Well, there isn't, but as you put on your LinkedIn post last week, I think the perception of sales is going to change, and it's people like us and people who are in sales that are doing it ethically that will ultimately change that perception.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was a funny post, that one. I was just really thinking about this idea, and I saw one of those signs on a truck, without trucks, Australia stops. And I was
Yeah.
just thinking, in Australia, there is like a pride around being a truck driver. Not that there's anything wrong with being a truck driver, but you compare
Mm.
that to sales. People are
Yeah.
like, oh, sales, it's a very
Yes.
different perception. And, why not be, proud about it and sort of build up the industry, right?
Well, it is, and it may be true that without trucks, Australia stops because you need to get stuff from A to B. But when you think about every single business, it will not survive if there wasn't for sales.
Yeah, exactly right. Like that trunk company had to sell their services to Coles or whoever it is that's, using their services. So it wouldn't even be on the road if it wasn't for sales, right?
That's it. That's it. So let's talk. Let's talk. You making the transition back from being a super account executive in the software sales realm and some startups to now coming back into what you do now, and niching into the sales profession. What was one of the couple well one or a couple of the key things that you focused on having been in sales that you noticed? Because you mentioned before that there are some people that were working really hard, making great money, but they were not necessarily using that money to good effect. Was there one or two things that you discovered by being within the sales industry that you thought, you know what, there's a real opportunity here that if I can position myself in a way, I can sort of differentiate against because nobody else is really doing it in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think one thing well, a few things that sales professionals sort of learn in their role really help when it comes to growing your wealth. Sales, I feel like when you think about sales, it can be equated to a lot of things. Like success in sales can be similar to success in sport or fitness, right? You've got your process that you follow. There's certain things you need to do to be successful. The same kind of thing happens with building a wealth. So I think salespeople are sort of uniquely positioned that they're very structured in the way the successful people have a lot of structure in the way they do things. So bringing that structure into managing your finances is a really sort of unique strong point that salespeople have if if they're ready to make this change.
Hmm.
So having structure around everything is critical to being successful. So for example, one of the things that I like to do is to automate investments. So if you're in sales, you've probably got no trouble paying your bills, right? You probably get all your bills, you pay them, and then you'll probably spend a lot of the money left over on, whatever. We talked about some things, maybe cars, what have you. Might buy a nice watch, might go out to a fancy dinner kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So if we just add in another bill to your overall expenses, an investment bill, let's say you're making 10 grand a month and we invest $1,500 a month, and that sort of goes on top of your other bills, and the rest you just spend how you want. Building that automatic investment in there is a really good way salespeople can get into the market and actually start investing and
Hmm.
basically have very little impact on their day-to-day life and how they manage things because it's just happening without really thinking about it. It's just happening like all of your other bills. So that's sort of one starting point that I like for salespeople because when they've got that structure there, I think they work really well with that.
Hmm. And so before we talk about some of the key strategies that you potentially use, and again, reminder, this is not specific advice. It's just we're just talking about concepts here.
Yeah.
Um, what are some of the key mistakes, if you like, or the areas that salespeople don't focus on that you think they should, and therefore the opportunities that potentially they're missing?
Yeah. So what I've found working with a range of different people is they kind of fall into different categories. Like not every sales professional is making the same mistakes with their finances, which I think is to be expected. So I kind of like to categorize people into three different buckets. Like not that everyone, fits into these same things, but it's probably something that a lot of people could identify with. So I feel like the typical one we've kind of touched on this is the spender, like the person that's making a lot of money and they're spending most of it and they're not getting ahead. So the mistakes with that kind of person would be, first of all, they need to manage their cash flow better, and an easy way to do that is by automating that investing, so it's happening without them stressing about it too much. So they need to have that in place. Also, structure around their other bank accounts because they need to meet their other expenses. So I
Yeah.
think having some structure around those other accounts. So what I mean by that is you might have a bank account for your household expenses. You know that your monthly mortgage is $3,000. You put $3,000 in there, as well as $700 for your electricity and gas or whatever, right? And then you have another account for your groceries, and you just use that account when you're going to buy groceries. So that's sort of the kinds of mistakes they're making, is not having that structure around cash flow. Then we can sort of work on other stuff from there. But then you've got like another category, which I like to call the coaster. So that's sort of someone that is coasting along, like they've probably bought a house, they've probably done a couple good things with their finances, but they're not really taking the right steps to grow their wealth long term. So for someone like that, I'd say the mistake they're making is they haven't really thought through their goals properly. So they should really focus on developing some goals around sort of bigger picture, longer term things. Like when do they want to retire? They might want to retire at 60 instead of 67, which a lot of people are
Mm.
retiring at in Australia, and they might want to send their kids to private school. They haven't had kids yet. Let's plan around that. So I'd say that person who's just sort of coasting along, not that it's just a good word to describe it. Like, not saying you're not working hard, like it's just the word that I've come up with to try to categorize this sort of group of people. So yeah, I'd say build out some goals and really think about what you're wanting to do longer term, and then the other category of people in sales I like to call the sprinter. So
The
that's someone who's
sprinter.
the sprinter. That's someone who's gone like 100%. All right, I'm making good money. Let's buy some investment properties. Let's buy some crypto. Let's buy all these shares. And they're kind of looking at it going, well, what have I done? I've got myself into a bit of a pickle here. Right? I've got all of these expenses. So I'd say for that person, they probably need to take a step back and reevaluate things, and probably do the same thing as the person in that coaster position, which is evaluate their goals. Like that, you might want to retire at 50, and you might want to have a house fully paid off that's 10 kilometers from the CBD or something, right? Whatever your goals are, and you look at your investments that you're really struggling to keep up with, and you might end up with $15 million and you only need seven. So they've probably gone too hard, right? So I'd say that group of people that have gone really, really hard and they're kind of going, I'm a bit underwater here,
Yeah.
actually take a step back. You might be going too hard. You might not need to be doing all of that. So a lot of it ties into goals. I think that's something that a lot of people in sales just don't really think through when it comes to their wealth. Um, they'll think about it when it comes to sales. I want to get promoted at this time. This is what I need to do, or I want to make X dollars of sales. This is how many calls I need to make. This is how much whatever I need to do. Right. So yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to goals, really building them out.
It's interesting you say that because these whether they're a coaster or a sprinter or somebody just starting out, they're taught in sales to set goals and set big goals, right? And sometimes those goals might be set by the company, by their sales leader in form of a sales target. So that's the goal. But very good at in terms of this is what I want to achieve, but not necessarily then extending that into, okay, how do I apply the same methodology to all the other parts of my life, one being finance, one being health, fitness, and stuff like that. Because
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of salespeople over my career burn themselves out because they're just working so hard because they thought success equaled hitting the sales target or being the number one salesperson, not realizing, of course, that yes, you hit that, but guess what? The day after the end of the financial year, you're back at zero and you're back
Yeah.
the same as everybody because you're only as good as your next sale. But if you if you don't have a good structure in place, and if you don't have a vision of where you're heading, it's sense and can sometimes be like a chicken running around with its head cut off.
Yeah. And we see a lot of burnout in sales. Like it's very obviously very common for people to change jobs and kind of, use that as that little refresher and kind of a reset. And a lot of people will do that and think, all right, I'm in this new company. It's going to be all great now. But if you haven't addressed the other areas like you're talking about, like um, the finance, but also the fitness side of things, like that's something for me that really dropped off last year that I'm getting back on top of. If you're earning good money but you feel terrible, it's not a great life, right?
Well, it's not, but then you can justify it by saying, "Hey, I'm really comfortable. It's I don't really have to do that because everyth's taken care of. I can just sort of
Yeah.
put all the money on the bed and just sort of leave it
Yeah. Very comfortable. Yeah, the money bed.
to
Yeah.
it." Now, what about the guys out there who, because sales can be a very seasonal, very up and down kind of profession. There are some days where you're riding across the wave, and then there are other days and other weeks and other months where it's like famine. So it can be, yeah, feast and famine. What about the guys out there that are in a sales role that their income is inconsistent, right? So
Yeah.
how do we deal with that in terms of it's hard? I mean, you can set goals, but from a structural point of view, for committing X number of dollars per month for all these, putting it in the different buckets, what do you say to people who are in an industry or in a sales role where it's quite seasonal in terms of their commissions? And some of them might be on commission only, some of them might be on,
Yeah.
low base, high commission, but it's quite spiky. So you might have some months where they're fantastic, and then other months you might have nothing at all. So how do we get around that? How do we deal with that?
Yeah. So I'd say the easiest way to deal with that is going back to that bank account structure and doing it a little bit differently. So let's say you only get paid like once a year. We'll take it to the extreme, right? You earn 200 grand a year and you get paid once a year kind of thing, right? Taking it all to that point. So what I would say the best way to do to handle that would be to have a bank account for your income to go into for that one payment you get a year, and then pay yourself a monthly or fortnightly payment from that account so you can have that consistency with your income. So
Yeah,
spread it out instead of having it all come in one chunk. Because what that will do, if you have it all come in one chunk, you'll probably end up spending it in ways that you don't want to. Like if you were to get a $200,000 transfer into your bank account, that would be a lot easier to blow it all on, on things you don't want to spend it on than if you split that across 12 payments across a
yeah,
year, for example. So to manage that, I would say have a bank account for that inconsistent income to go into and then spread it out. So you could apply the same thing if you get paid quarterly or however often you get paid, or if you might have inconsistency where you'll have a smaller payment that will come through one month and then a large payment that will come through in the middle of the year, whatever it may be, is work your way back, look at on average what you'd be making, and then pay yourself a more consistent amount to
yeah,
help you make it easier to manage it.
yeah. No, it makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Because there are a lot of people that are in that sort of situation, and particularly commission only type
Yeah.
level type roles. So they might have, and the particularly when you think of things like COVID, right? How it affected a lot of people. There's no real consistency of income or cash flow. So be able to plan that accordingly is really important. Which comes back to goal setting as well, right? So knowing what the end goal is and knowing, I guess, what your thresholds are as well. What's tolerable,
Yeah.
and what's your, I guess, best case scenario.
Yeah, yeah. I think building in uh some variance in there. So if you sort of look at it and you go, I made 150 last year. I'm going to make 150 this year. It probably isn't the best way of doing it. Maybe go, I made 150 last year. I might make between 120 and 180, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Cool. So just a little question popped in my head. What are your thoughts, and what sort of conversations you're having with the stuff that's happening in the media right now around stage three tax cuts? Because that will affect a lot of salespeople this year in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah, yeah. I was wondering if this would come up in our conversation because it is pretty topical. I actually did a post, it was probably a week ago. Albanese was in the media saying, we're not changing stage three tax cuts. They're going to stay as they are. We promised this going into the election. No one needs to worry. So I posted this video going, this is the stage three tax cuts. Here are some examples of the impact it'll have on how much you bring home, kind of thing. And then just yesterday, I think it was, they've now turned around and gone, you know what? We're changing it. So I mean, it's a bit early to sort of say because I don't think it's 100% set in stone. But from the looks of it, basically what they were planning on doing was simplifying the tax system and adjusting it to uh, increase with inflation a bit. So basically, they were going to remove one of the middle brackets to simplify it
Mm.
and push out the top bracket a little bit, as well as decreasing the rates. So what that would mean is if you're a middle to high income earner, you would be saving a decent amount of tax, and the lower income earners weren't really saving much. So basically, what they're talking about now is shifting it where the lower to middle income earners are getting a bigger saving than they were planned to have, and higher income earners, people above $150,000, between so 150 to $200,000, their
Yeah.
benefit I think is roughly halved depending on who you are. Uh, so yeah, it's a bit early to say exactly what's going to happen, but it looks like that's where it's heading. I mean, for me, I don't think, I don't know how political I can get on this podcast.
Well, I'll
But
put it this way. I'm not sure Albanese would be plugging into this particular podcast.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the way that I look at it is Labor's philosophy is to generally give more benefits to your low and your middle income earners, right?
Yeah.
That hasn't changed between now and the election. So when they were going into the election, why did they not change the policy, or why did they not tell people this is what we're going to do? They said we're not going to change stage three tax cuts. Vote for us. We're not going to change them. Cool. People vote for you, and then you change it. Like, I feel like there almost needs to be a change in politics where if they have an election promise, they shouldn't be able to break it. Like stuff outside of that, I understand there needs to be discretion and stuff. But
There needs
when
to be
you,
a higher power that holds them to account.
yeah, yeah, because you can basically just say I'll do anything, get voted in, and go, oh, not doing it anymore. Sorry about that. So yeah, I mean, it's not, yeah, people that are working hard, earning above that $150,000. Generally, people that are earning above that are working very hard, and they're paying a lot of tax already. The whole purpose of these stage three tax cuts was to finally address that higher income earner. The stage one and stage two tax cuts were addressing the lower middle income earners. So it was kind of time for the higher income earners to get their turn.
Yeah.
And it looks like it isn't really going to be as beneficial as initially planned. But yeah, I guess what can you do? You've just got to deal with it, right?
Well, the thing is, and we say this a lot in sales, that you've got to focus on the stuff you got control over and
Yeah,
not put too much mental energy to the stuff you don't, right? Because it'll be what it is. It
yeah,
is what it is. So, um, my own take on all this is you can get so caught up in what the government's doing or not doing. You can agree with them or disagree. At the end of the day, it's not going to impact the way that you go about what you do. And if you're thinking, oh my God, we're not going to get a tax benefit now, I'm going to shut up shop. Well, that's
yeah,
that's just flawed thinking, right?
yeah.
So it just despite what's going on, and I remember one of my earliest mentors, who's a podcaster in the States, he said, you know what, through every United States president, I've made more money than the previous one.
Yeah.
And yet there are people within America in particular, no doubt there'll be people in Australia that blame the government for their predicament that they find themselves in, where in actual fact, we are responsible for our own actions and ultimately we're responsible for our own results, right? Now, whatever the government does or doesn't do in relation to tax, that's just, you just got no control over that. So focus on what you do control. You can control your actions, you control the decisions you make, you can control where you allocate your funds to build wealth or not, right? You can go and piss it up against a wall and go to the casino and think, I'll double my money. In fact, one of my mates in Las Vegas just posted something on LinkedIn to say a client of hers came to her yesterday and said, "Oh, I've just lost $1 million," because
Jesus.
and he's obviously a very wealthy dude, but lost $1 million in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
But you know what? Focus on what you've got control over is the key message.
Yeah.
Which means speaking to people like you, who've got I guess, the financial background and the structure that can provide advice, and this again is just general advice. You talk to the professionals, because when you want to get better at anything, you go and talk to people who are experts in that field, right? And you listen to them. As long as that, and this is another sales lesson, as long as those people have credibility and they can build trust, right? And that's the key thing.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think about other areas of my life and how much experts have helped me. One of the things I've stopped doing it now, because of the brain damage. But I used to do some boxing, and I'd been boxing for like, off and on for probably 3 or 4 years, something like that. And I'd never done PTs. And I
Yep.
started doing PTs with this. His name's Greg Bell down in Geelong. Is a really good boxing coach. If anyone for, I don't think there'll be many people in Geelong that are listening that are looking for a boxing coach. But if you are,
You never
go and
know.
see go and see Greg Bell. He's really good. Um, yeah, going through PTs with him and understanding the little things that I was doing wrong was amazing. Like I did it for about a year, and you don't know what you're messing up. Like you think what you're doing is all good, but there'll be these little things that you don't even notice, and they'll get tweaked, and then you'll change that thing, and then another problem will come into play because you change how you're standing, which means you change how you throw this punch, and then you have to change that, and it all sort of ties together. So yeah, I really like uh, the way that sales translates into fitness, translates into wealth. Like it all sort of ties together.
Yeah.
The way that you improve these things.
It is. As you were talking there, I'm thinking back to the last when I was playing golf, and I used to be a self-confessed golf addict. But having said that, I haven't played since December the 10th, 2008. So
Oh wow!
if I don't play this year, it'll be 16 years in December.
Why'd
But
you quit?
oh, I moved. We moved up to New Gisborne and bought 2.5 acres, and it's just one thing. Insert excuse here. I just
Yeah,
didn't get around to. I used to play every week.
yeah,
Had kids. Kids got grown up and got up here, and I just haven't gone back to it.
yeah,
But having said that, I was watching the Netflix show Full Swing, and it's the following the PGA Tour.
yeah,
And I said to my wife, you know what? I forgot how much I love golf. And she goes, well, go and bloody play golf.
yeah,
But I haven't done it yet because I've been other things as being priority. And there was a point to that story, and I've got no idea what that point was. But hey, oh, here it was. Here it
yeah.
was. I was actually talking about that technique and how Mr. Bell was actually getting you to stand in a certain way. I always had trouble getting out of bunkers, right? And then I had some golf
Mm,
lessons, and just through one golf lesson, I could start getting my bunker shots pretty much within a couple of feet of the hole, which on a
yeah, wow.
consistent basis, which is fantastic.
Do
So
you
it's
remember
about
what the change was?
just little things like grip, swing, focus on a certain port, just be behind the ball, sweeping through rather than just to chop it out.
Hmm.
Just really simple techniques. But the key message I got from that was if you listen to an expert who has runs on the board, who has credibility, and they're there to help you get better,
Hmm.
then listen to them.
Yeah,
And you've got to get really clear on who you surround yourself with and who you take advice from
yeah,
because there are going to be
definitely.
charlatans out there that are
Yeah,
going to want to take advantage. And this is where a lot of people have the fixation on sales. I think, oh, a salesperson wants to feather their own nest at my expense. Well, no, that's not the case because the vast majority of good salespeople are there to actually help you solve a problem. And if they can
yeah,
do that, then you're going to build a level of trust. Now, if they can do that on a consistent basis, then you've got credibility over a long period of time. And the
yeah,
same would be said with what you do on a I guess advice basis with working with sales team, which brings us to you have a program known as the Wealth Through Sales. Now, without giving away the details, just are there some key points that salespeople listening to this right now are sales leaders who um, haven't got a financial planner, haven't thought about a financial planner, but have been thinking about, well, what I'm making a good chunk of coin, right? Um, what are some things they can think about to start putting in place to at least start the building blocks of some long-term wealth for them?
yeah. So there's three core elements to the wealth through sales program. And in each of those elements, obviously, there's different steps that we go through. So the first one is having a process. So what I mean by that is having a way to get money from your bank account where you're earning your money into to actually invest it. So I've kind of touched on that at a high level. So
Yes.
having that structure around your bank accounts, I'd say anyone that doesn't have that, just get on it. Like it's a pretty simple process to go through and will make your life so much easier. So having structure around your bank accounts, different bank accounts for different categories of expenses.
Yeah.
That way you can choose how much you want to spend for each category. So it's not about limiting yourself. You might say, I want to spend $1,000 a week eating out and going to restaurants. Cool. Just have the money sitting there for it. Then you don't have to overthink it, right? So have that structure, and then obviously have a portion that will be invested. So automating a portion of your income to go to investments. So having that process there, Then the next part is where you're actually investing. So you want to have a strategy around what to invest in. So when you're investing, the easiest places to get started, generally the sort of easiest way to get into it would be through like a micro investing platform. For most people listening to this that's probably a little bit too sort of basic. That's if you're like wanting to put $50 a month into it kind of thing.
Yeah.
The next sort of step up from that would be an exchange traded fund or a managed fund.
Yeah.
So people can sort of jump online and do their own research into it. Obviously, I'd recommend they speak to an advisor, but you can find this stuff out yourself as well.
Yeah.
So that's probably the easiest point of call when it comes to investing. And you can look at things like investment properties and things like that as well. But part of what we do when we go sort of deeper into this with clients is look at things like using debt where possible to get ahead and making sure it's tax effective as well,
Yeah.
which is probably a bit too high level to go into in this. But then the final part is having a backup plan. So things obviously go wrong in life and in sales. So the easiest sort of two things to quickly check off with the backup plan would be building an emergency fund.
Hmm.
Typically, the recommended amount to have would be 3 to 6 months of living expenses there.
Yeah.
If you're sort of a bit if you're happy to take a bit more risk, you could sort of stick with that 3 months and then put the rest of your money into investments kind of thing. But then another part to backup plan is having your personal insurances. This is probably one of the biggest ones that I would say people in sales haven't really done, especially in Australia. So with your superannuation, you might have a little bit of insurance, but I'd recommend just getting a good understanding of what insurance you have and if you need more, getting more.
Yeah.
Because if you have a car, let's say you've got like a I don't know new Golf or something, it's probably I don't know $40,000-$50,000 for a new Golf. I haven't looked at Golf prices lately, so I might be a bit off there, but that's sort of a rough idea, right? Then let's say so you probably have insurance for that. Like if you've got a new car, you probably have insurance for it. If you with your income, you probably don't have insurance against your income. So most people need their income to pay their bills and live, right? That's why we're working and that's why we're in sales is to make an income. Most people don't have insurance against that.
Yeah.
So let's say you earn 200 grand a year and you've got 30 years left to work. That's $6 million of income you're going to earn over that time frame, assuming the income stays consistent, right?
Yeah.
Most people don't have insurance against that.
Yeah.
So you can get insurance against your income. So if you get sick or injured and you can't work, this insurance policy will pay you an income. And people underestimate how likely bad things are to happen to them. Like I'm sure everyone knows people that have got sick or injured and can't work. Like for
Mm.
myself, last year I had about a month I couldn't work because I got really sick. So this stuff happens. So yeah, I'd say get on top of your insurances to understand what you've got in place. Do you need to increase it? Obviously, people can talk to me if they want help with it. But I'd say that's another key part. So yeah, the high level overview of the wealth through sales model is having that process to start investing, having the strategy of where you're going to invest to get the most out of it, and then having a backup plan for when things go wrong. So this can basically be applied to all people in sales. They can do it themselves, or if they want more help, they can reach out to me or another advisor. Like another advisor will have their own way of doing things.
Mm.
But yeah, obviously what I do is tailored for salespeople.
It's it's great. It's a great reminder because I was remembering back when I first entered the workforce back in the day, and my old man said, "Get your superannuation sorted out, your own super, and start
Yeah,
contributing to it, and make sure there's income protection insurance, right?" And I've never not had income protection, right?
that's great. Yeah,
Even as a facilitator, coach, mentor, salesperson now, still have income protection.
yeah,
Always. So it's an absolute must. It's as often people don't, because part of this is financial literacy, and my own experience dealing with salespeople with a lot in the last 10 20 years, they might be very uh, uh, knowledgeable in all things sales, their products, but it's amazing how it's a generalization. I know how illiterate they are on things like insurances. Like some of my people, and I never provided financial advice, but
yeah,
sometimes you'd be having those conversations as a sales leader and saying, "Well, who have you got your income protection through?" And they say, "Well, what's that?" Right? Just little things like that.
yeah,
Um, total permanent disability, or life insurance, or whatever the insurance happens to be.
Yeah.
And yet, as you said, they'll make sure that they make their car insurance an absolute priority. Well, that's great,
Yeah.
but what's the number one asset, right? Because if you're not here, you can't make any cash flow whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly right.
So look after
Exactly right.
yourself first. Look after
Yeah.
yourself first.
Yeah.
Um, it's an absolute must. Now, with all of that, and you don't have to start big, right? Because a lot of people might look at all this and say, "Oh, that's just too much. It's too. It's easy if I'll continue what I'm doing, and I'll look at it in 6 months' time, right?" The key thing, and I love your take on this, when it comes to building wealth, and a lot of people in sales think, you know what, I'm going to make a lot of money this year, and that's fantastic. So it's the instant gratification. And unfortunately, a lot of salespeople live in the world of instant gratification, and
Yeah.
it's almost conditioning from their sales leaders. You got to get your target, got to get your target, and we're going to throw all these incentives at you. When it comes to building wealth, it's not overnight. It's the little things. So as you said, even if you put $150 a month away and it's on autopilot,
Yeah.
it compounds over time. So, as we kind of bring this to a close, some key thoughts around timing in terms of time, because I know as a reputable financial advisor, you wouldn't be saying, "Hey, we're going to throw all this money in here, and within the next 12 months, we're going to deliver a 25% return."
Yeah.
That's just it's not realistic, right? So
Yeah.
for people listening to this who are thinking, you know what, that sounds like a lot of work, what would you say to those kind of people to get not so much put them at ease, but just give them reality in terms of what we're doing here?
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to just investing a small sort of automated amount like that, that's really not going to have much of an impact on your day-to-day life, right? So you can just get started and not stress about it too much. So to get the sort of basics happening like that, yeah, I feel like you're kidding yourself if you're kind of using the excuse of it's going to be too hard. Now, if you want to get on top of absolutely everything and get things sort of, completely structured in the best way to set you up for your long term, there will be a bit of work in it. There's no denying that. Like, it's not just going to be a half-hour meeting and everything's all sorted. It is going to take a bit of time, but I think people would be surprised at how simple it is once you actually learn about what you need to get right and how little impact it will actually have on your day-to-day life once everything's all set up properly.
Mm,
So I'd say think about it as more of a bit of a short-term pain, getting on top of all this stuff properly to get it all done properly. It might take you 6 months or 6 to 12 months of allocating an hour a month, right? Like it's not a lot of time, but you can set this time aside, get on top of all this stuff, and then you really only need sort of periodically reviewing it is really all you need, unless there's some big changes, like you get an
mm.
inheritance or something like that. That might change the way that we're working towards your goals. But yeah, it's a little bit of a short term pain for a long term gain. But I'd also consider what will happen if you don't get on top of this stuff. Like if you keep trucking along the way that you are, what will your life look like in 20 years time when you want to retire?
Yeah,
Can you retire how you want to?
yeah,
And will you sort of look back and go, oh, I should have done it. Like what that's one of the biggest things that I find when I would deal with sort of generally the sales professionals that I'm getting at the moment are sort of younger,
yeah,
um, in their 30s kind of thing or 20s. When I was dealing with your people, your traditional financial planning clients are people that are really close to retirement. You would always get people that would say, "Thank you so much. What you've done is great, but I just wish I did this 20 years ago."
yeah.
Because they realize that they missed out on a massive benefit by not getting on top of it. And you're gonna have to get on top of it one day or another. You may as well do it sooner rather than later so you get the most benefit.
Absolutely. It's like that that Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a Chinese bamboo tree was probably 20 years ago, but the next best time is right now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So with that, Darcy, people listening to this who want to know a little bit more about you, what you do, where's the best place for them to connect and learn a bit more about Barwon Wealth Management?
Yeah, so anyone can add me on LinkedIn. So Darcy O'Rourke on LinkedIn. If you want to get a bit of a deeper understanding of the wealth through sales model and get some more sort of technical free information, I have a training session on that. So you can go to barwonfinance.com.au /free training. And another thing I wanted to just extend like an offer to your audience for any sales leaders, if you've got a team that you think could benefit from this kind of information and you'd like to have a bit of like a lunch and learn,
Yeah.
a session where I run through this kind of stuff, anyone is welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can tee one of those up at no
Cool.
cost to you.
Yeah.
So we could do that either on Zoom or we could do it in person if you're in Melbourne or the Geelong region.
Yeah. Awesome. So I recommend people do that, and I'll put those details in the show notes. So before we wrap up, is there any last piece of advice that is top of mind that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I'd say just get started with investing. Like a 5% return isn't as good as a 7% return, but a 5% return is better than nothing. So don't overthink it. Get started.
So you're saying don't put your money under your mattress?
Yeah, I can't recommend that.
It's amazing how many times we've seen older people, and you go and clean up their house, and there's all these bloody notes under
the biscuit tin with the stack of
I
money.
just don't trust banks.
Yeah.
Darcy, absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. That was very very enlightening, and I'm sure that people listening to this, whether they be salespeople or sales leaders who haven't gone down this path, at least you've given them something to think about. And the great news is, well, I'd like to think that it's not too late to start, because as you said, even if you're starting at 55 and you haven't really done anything up until now, you've still got some runway.
Yeah.
Than if you don't do nothing. So do something, and whether it's with you or with somebody else or with themselves, just take some responsibility and move forward, because your future self is going to be very, very grateful for it.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me on again, Joe.
No worries, mate. Thanks, and have a fabulous day.
You too. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.